Officers stand by for mission briefing. Red alert. MFA isn't a shield on my watch. Stolen tokens ride past it like cloaked ships through an open gate. Firewalls guard borders. But the breach doesn't cross borders. It hijacks identity. Here's our mission promise. We'll map a real M365 tenant breach end to end. We start in the attacker's cockpit. We end with detections and policy logs you can deploy today. We'll track consent phishing, token theft, and OAuth abuse. We'll show the exact logs, the Sentinel analytics, and the Entra controls. There's one policy that breaks this chain. Stay sharp. Threat intel brief. What modern crews actually do. Listen up, officers. The intelligence picture is clear. The enemy doesn't brute force doors. They borrow badges. They use commodity AiTM phishing kits. Phishing as a service outfits run at scale. Malicious OAuth apps drift across tenants like multi-tenant gunships. The tooling is cheap. The effect is strategic. Their goal set is simple. Take the mailbox. Siphon SharePoint. Persist via app consent and tokens. With offline access, they keep refreshed tokens alive. With Graph, they pull data quiet and headless. With mail rules, they blind your sentries. It's why old defenses fail. MFA blocks passwords, not replayable sessions. Admin portals don't show OAuth sprawl by default. Portals lull crews to sleep while service principals multiply in the dark. You see users. They use apps. You chase login failures. They replay cookies. Different war. Assume this terrain. Entra ID holds identity. Exchange Online and SharePoint house the crown. Defender and Sentinel exist, but they're undertuned. Telemetry flows, alerts don't. That gap is where attackers live. Here are the artifacts that matter. Entra ID sign-in logs show authentication requirements satisfied. That phrase hides the heist when a stolen cookie glides in. Audit logs record consent to application, service principal created, and app role assigned to. An Exchange mailbox, Audit tracks inbox rule adds, external forwarding, and folder moves. SharePoint and the unified audit log show file accessed and file downloaded with an AppID stamp. App registrations and service principal updates mark credential drops and scope creep. The thing most people miss. You don't just guard the login, you bind the token. Device binding and conditional access. Based on risk, cut the replay. That's the shield, not another password policy. Token protection for Exchange and SharePoint makes a stolen cookie useless off-device. Risk-based conditional access holds the session even when MFA already passed. Now, the operational truth. Attackers run AiTM reverse proxies to capture credentials and the session token in the same pass. They land a rogue multi-tenant app. Scopes look harmless. User, read, read, offline access. But together, they grant durable reach. They pivot to graph harvesting. They do it with no human logon in the loop. The mailbox becomes a data hose. SharePoint becomes a quiet stream. No pop-ups, no prompts, just API calls. Your telemetry grid must light up early. In Sentinel, analytic rules should watch for consent by risky users or from unfamiliar IP ranges. UEBA in Defender flags, impossible travel and sudden session switches that match hijack patterns. Custom KQL can alert on a new service principal with high-value scopes. That's how we catch the ship as it decloaks. But remember this, crew, visibility without policy is theater. If users can grant consent, you'll lose ground. If tokens aren't bound, the enemy will replay sessions from clean infrastructure. If your allow list is blank, every AppID looks normal. Follow protocol, disable user consent, enforce admin workflow, turn on token protection where supported. Segment conditional access by workload and device compliance. Then your detections mean action, not after-action reports. Hold the line. Initial access, consent phishing, and token theft. Your mission coordinates. The breach starts with consent phishing plus AiTM token theft. One click, no MFA prompt, full access. That's the play. Why this matters. If a user grants consent, an app gets scopes the user doesn't understand. Read looks harmless. Offline access looks boring. Together, they create durable reach that survives password resets. and with AiTM, the attacker steals the session cookie at the same time. MFA already fired. The cookie replays clean. Gate wide open. Here's what the crews run. An adversary-in-the-middle reverse proxy sits between the user and Microsoft. The email lure is standard. Invoice, share request, payroll update. The link routes through the proxy. The user enters credentials. The proxy relays to Microsoft. MFA completes. The proxy captures the session token. At that same moment, a benign-looking multi-tenant app asks for consent. The prompt says, "Read your mail and basic profile." The user approves. No alarm, no second factor. The attacker now holds two assets, a live cookie and a sanctioned service principal. Now the techniques stack. First, consent grant to a malicious multi-tenant app. Scopes, user. Read mail. Read offline access. The key is offline access. It authorizes refresh tokens for long sessions. Second, session token theft via the reverse proxy. The cookie gets replayed from a new device. No password, no prompt. Third, OAuth abuse through Microsoft Graph. The attacker queries mail and files headless. Harvest begins quiet, consistent, API cadence, not human behavior. Let me show you exactly how we see it. In Entra ID audit, you'll find consent to application, then service principal created, then app role assigned to. Those three mean the app landed, the service identity exists, and scopes are active. In Entra ID sign-in logs, look for authentication requirements satisfied, tied to a new device or country within minutes of the user's real login. That pattern screams cookie replay. In Exchange mailbox audit, watch for add inbox rule, set inbox rule, or SMTP forwarding settings, often dropped right after consent to blind the user. In the unified audit log and SharePoint logs, file accessed and file downloaded events show an APID, not Outlook or a browser. That APID is the ghost doing the pulling. Detections to arm now. In Sentinel, build an analytic that fires on consent to application when the requester is high value or the source IP is unfamiliar. Pair it with a watch list of sanctioned APIDs. Anything outside that list gets priority 1. Turn on UEBA for impossible travel and sudden session switching. Identity satisfied from one country, then a second country, minutes apart, same user agent string. That's a hijack signature. Add custom KQL to flag new service principals with scopes like mail. Read-write files read.all, sites read.all, or offline access when granted to non-admins. Those scopes are the data hose. Now here's where most people mess up. They leave user consent on. They trust that MFA blocks the fish. They don't enable token protection. Result, the attacker asks the user for access. The organization never approved, and the stolen cookie lands on clean infrastructure the tenant trusts. No control sees it as foreign. You get no prompt. You get no fail. You get no chance. The quick win. Disable user consent across the tenant. Enable the admin consent workflow. Force all app requests through review. Second, turn on token protection for Exchange and SharePoint where available. Device bind those tokens so replay from another machine dies at the gate. Third, enable sign-in risk conditional access. If risk is medium or above, require step up or block. This stops a stolen cookie piggybacking from a new country. Operational example, a sales exec hits the fish. They pass MFA. Within 5 minutes, sign-in logs show requirements satisfied from 2 countries. Audit shows consent to application to a multi-tenant app named Mail Optimizer. Unified audit shows file downloaded by that app ID from a SharePoint sales site. Exchange mailbox audit shows a new inbox rule moving messages from security to RSS subscriptions. That's the entire chain, end to end on a single screen. Once you nail this picture, everything else clicks. The first battle is consent. The second is token replay. Shut those doors, and the rest of the chain starves. Hold the line. Persistence. Living off the land with OAuth and mail rules. Listen up, officers. Once consent lands and the cookie replays, the enemy stops sprinting. They dig in. They turn access into residency. Password resets won't save you now. App consent survives them. Refresh tokens renew them. They become service. Quiet, durable, hard to evict. Why this matters? If they keep offline access, they hold a refresh token that rotates forever until you revoke the grant. They don't need the user again. They don't need a prompt. The graph becomes their supply line. Your mail and SharePoint flow out in steady low-noise bursts. No one watches headless ships. Here's the playbook. First, they protect the tap. Hidden inbox rules route anything from security, IT, or Microsoft to a dead folder or delete on arrival. The user sees nothing. Second, they harden persistence. They add a second benign-looking multi-tenant app. Same scopes, safer name. If you kill the first, the twin breathes life back in. Third, they upgrade scopes over time. From mail, read to mail, read write. From sites, read.all to files, read.all, small changes, big reach, operational telemetry. In Entra Audit, watch for update application, add credentials, key credential added, password credential added. Those are key drops. Service principals getting new secrets mean hands on your lifeline. In app role assigned to, scope creep appears as new role assignments. Mail, read write, sites, read.all, files, read all. Each grant expands the blast radius. In Exchange Admin Audit and Mailbox Audit, set inbox rule, new inbox rule, and set mailbox with forwarding's MTP address tell you the blindfold is on. Transport rules that redirect external are the exfil highways. Let me show you exactly how to monitor it. In Sentinel, build an analytic for inbox rules that forward externally and inbox rules that delete or move security mail. Use an allow list for approved forwarding domains. Everything else triggers. Pair that with Defender UEBA to detect sudden spikes in graph calls by a new AppID. Baseline per app. Alert when call volume jumps or hits odd hours. This reveals the quiet hose turning into a pump. Now here's where most people mess up. They revoke a single token. They reset a password. They close the incident. The service principal keeps breathing. The refresh token renews. The twin app wakes up. Days later, files keep moving. The crew thinks it's normal sync. It's not. You didn't cut the artery. You only scratched the skin. How to break it? Follow protocol. Step 1. Revoke app consent for every malicious and suspicious app in Entra. Remove the service principals. Kill the grants at the root. Step 2. Invalidate refresh tokens, tenant-wide, for the affected identities. Force sign out. End active sessions. Step 3. Rotate application secrets for any sanctioned app that touched the compromised accounts. Assume token leakage. Step 4. Implement conditional access session controls. Block legacy refresh tokens. Set sign-in frequency to force re-evaluation on high-risk signals. Device bind tokens with token protection for Exchange and SharePoint where supported. Replay dies at the gate. Quick lab to practice. Pull Entra Audit and search activity display. Name equals consent to application. Capture the AppID, cross-map that AppID to unified audit events for file accessed and file downloaded. You'll see which SharePoint sites the app touched. Next, query Exchange mailbox audit for new inbox rule and set inbox rule by that user in the same time frame. That alignment confirms blinding plus pull. Finally, check app role assigned to for that service principal. Any growth in scopes after day 1 is a persistence tell. Your countermeasures need structure. Build a Sentinel watch list of approved app IDs, your sanctioned fleet. Alert on deviations. Add a playbook. When consent to application fires, an app ED not in watch list, auto-revoke grants, disable the app, notify the SOC, and open a ticket. Tie in Defender for cloud apps, OAuth app governance to rate limit or block apps with high permissions and anomalous use. One system sees, the other acts, dwell time collapses to minutes. But remember this: policy first, detection second. Disable user consent. Enforce admin workflow. Require compliant device for Exchange and SharePoint. External forwarding disabled by default with a narrow exception list. Then your telemetry becomes a weapon, not a diary. Hold the line. Lateral movement. From mailbox to SharePoint to keys. Engineers, the beachhead is up. Now the crew pivots. From a single mailbox, they map the galaxy. Their target is data gravity, SharePoint, mail, and the directory. Graph turns it all into a hose. Why this matters? The mailbox is intel. It holds project names, site links, vendors, and leadership threads. With that context, the enemy charts where the crown lives. SharePoint libraries, finance folders, executive calendars. From there, they don't guess, they query. Here's the movement pattern. First, they enumerate sites via graph with sites. Read all. They query route, then drives, then lists. They harvest site IDs and drive IDs. They sample a few files to validate value. If it pays, they scale. Second, they rate the mailbox for MFA reset paths and vendor conversations. Business email compromise rides these threads. They inject replies, change payment instructions, and wait. Third, they probe Entra with directory. Read scopes, they list users, groups, and app role assignments. They tag privileged users and shared mailboxes. If scopes allow, they grow to files. Read all or mail. Read write. Each inch is strategic. Now the telemetry that gives them away. In the unified audit log, you'll see file accessed and file downloaded with a single APID hitting many sites. The pattern is a volume from one caller, not many users. In Entra sign-ins, a single app ID is tied to multiple high-value users within hours. Cross-entity correlation lights that up. In Exchange Mailbox Audit, new inbox rule with redirect to or delete message appears near the exfil window. Forwarding to external SMTP addresses is the red flare. Listen up, officers. Sentinel and Defender can box this in if we tune them. UEBA should watch per APID download volume per site and trigger on time of day deviations. Quiet service apps don't pull 10,000 files at 2 a.m. unless someone turned the tap. Build an analytic rule for high-risk OAuth scopes assigned to non-admin users. If mail.read-write or files.read-don't all lands on a standard user, raise priority 1. Pair a playbook. When anomalous download volume by APID triggers, block the app in Entra, revoke its grants, and set the user session to sign out. If Defender for endpoint flags cookie theft tools on a device, isolate the endpoint and correlate with identity events. Exfiltration tradecraft is subtle. They use graph batch APIs to group calls. That smooths rates and dodges crude thresholds. They throttle to mimic sync clients. They exfiltrate to attacker cloud storage hosted in benign ranges, so IP reputation stays clean. They may hop through a vendor account in your tenant to blend further. This is why baseline by APID and site, not raw counts. Context beats thresholds. Defense moves that work on my watch. Conditional access must segment by workload. Require compliant device for Exchange and SharePoint. A headless app tied to a random VM will fail. Block user consent tenant-wide. Force admin workflow. Bind tokens with token protection for Exchange and SharePoint where supported. Now the replay dies and app calls must come from known posture. DLP needs service principal awareness. Policies that only watch user agents miss graph apps. Enable external forwarding disabled by default, then create a narrow allow list for domains that truly need it. Now, the mistake that ruins everything. Teams allow broad scopes to low-risk apps for convenience. They also maintain a wide exception for external forwarding because vendors need it. That's an exfil runway. Shut it. Build a proper exception request pipeline. Tie it to Sentinel watchlists. Every exception becomes an entity you monitor harder. Let me show you exactly how to hunt this. In Sentinel, query the unified audit log for office workload equals SharePoint, group by app ID, count file downloaded over 1 hour windows, and compare to the last 14 days. APIDs that spike without prior baseline are suspects. Next, pull Entra sign-ins, where the same app ID accessed multiple users in 24 hours, especially roles tagged high value. Then correlate Exchange Mailbox Audit for forwarding and delete rules within the same window. That triad, app spike, cross-user access, messaging blindfold, is the Lateral signature. Operational story, fast. A marketing manager account grants consent. Within hours, unified audit shows APD9F pulling 3,000 files from 3 sites tied to sales and finance. Entra sign-ins link that AppI'd to 4 executives. Exchange shows a redirect rule on one exec's mailbox to an external domain. The playbook fires, revokes the app, removes rules, forces sign-outs, and isolates a device flagged for cookie theft tooling. Damage window under 20 minutes. That's the standard. But remember this. Policy closes doors before detection rings bells. Lock consent, bind tokens, segment access by device compliance. Your telemetry then becomes early warning, not a postmortem. Hold the line. Detection engineering, playbooks, KQL, and unified response. Officers, we compress dwell time now. We turn telemetry into automatic action. Seconds matter. Minutes decide impact. Follow protocol. Objective is simple. Convert key signals into playbooks that cut access, blind the adversary, and alert command. No manual heroics, just disciplined automation. Core playbooks in Sentinel. First trigger, consent to application or new high-risk OAuth scope. Action set, revoke all grants for that AppID, disable the service principal, notify SOC, and open an incident with high severity. Add a step to comment the event back into Entra's audit trail for chain of custody. Second trigger, external forwarding rule created or inbox rule that deletes or moves messages from security senders. Action set, remove the rule, block external forwarding if not on allow list, send the user a security brief and force user sign out across sessions. Third trigger, anomalous download volume by AppID in SharePoint or files. Read. All surge. Action set, block the app in Entra, revoke refresh tokens for affected users, quarantine the user session, and, if Defender for Endpoint shows cookie theft tooling on any linked device, isolate that endpoint. One alert, full cut. Your KQL hunting pack is your radar. Keep it lean, keep it lethal. Entra audit focus, audit logs, where activity display, name in, consent to application, add service principal credentials, update application, project time generated, initiated by target resources, result unified audit, focus, office activity, where office workload in, SharePoint, Exchange, summarize events, count by AppID, office workload, bin, time generated, 1H, join kind, left T, allow listed apps on AppID sign-ins, focus, sign-in logs, where authentication, requirements, exhale, satisfied, summarize countries, key count, location details, country or region, devices, D count, device detail, device ID by user principal name, bin, time generated, 1H, where countries, 1 or devices, 1, tie these to watch lists. Maintain 3, approved AppIDs, high-value users, allowed forwarding domains. Your analytics should cross-check every alert against these lists to auto-prioritize and act. Entra ID policies that break the chain, activate them. Disable user consent, enforce the admin consent workflow. Require phishing-resistant MFA like FIDO2 or Windows Hello for high-value users. Turn on token protection for Exchange and SharePoint where available. Set sign-in frequency for sensitive workloads and disable persistent browser sessions on risky profiles. Conditional access must require compliant device for Exchange and SharePoint access. Block sign-ins with medium or high risk. These settings convert identity posture into a shield. Defender integrations complete the perimeter. Enable Defender for Cloud Apps OAuth app governance. It will surface high permission apps, anomalous use and risky publisher patterns. Turn on alerts for high-impact scopes, mass downloads, and unusual tenants per app spreads. In Defender for Identity, use lateral path insights tied to service principal activity. Link spikes in graph calls from new AppIDs to identity anomalies. When either fires, let Sentinel own the response. Common gaps and fixes. No app governance. Enable OAuth governance and approvals. Flat conditional access. segment by workload, user risk, and device state. No allow list, deploy the Audit watch list and enforce it in every analytic and playbook. Alerts without action waste time. Action without tuning causes noise. We require both. Operational drill. A consent to application event lands for a non-allow listed Audit. Analytic fires. Playbook revokes grants, disables the app, forces sign-outs for the user, and posts a briefing to SecOps. In parallel, a second analytic sees file downloaded surge tied to that app ID. The playbook blocks the app's sign-in, revokes refresh tokens for all impacted users, and opens a unified incident. Defender for Endpoint flags a cookie theft tool on one machine. Isolation executes, containment under 5 minutes. That's our standard. Before we close, remember the hierarchy. Policy blocks, detection reveals, automation cuts, hunting confirms, reporting educates. This order holds the line. The one-step breaker and your orders. If you remember nothing else, bind tokens and kill consent sprawl. Controls that act before attackers replay identity. Your orders disable user consent and enforce the admin workflow now. Turn on token protection and risk-based conditional access with compliant device required for Exchange and SharePoint. Deploy Sentinel playbooks for consent events, external forwarding, and anomalous downloads tied to Audit. Run the KQL hunts today, purge unsanctioned apps, and brief executive mailboxes with step-up authentication. Hold the line.